my name, oh gosh, there's a lot of sunshine here. My name is Erika Meza, and I am the illustrator for my two border towns.
Hi, everybody. My name is David Bowles, and I am the author of My Two Border Towns, speaking to you from my home on the border in the lower Rio Grande Valley. And I know that y'all are up closer to the upper Rio Grande Valley in New Mexico. And it's just a delight to be able to answer some of the questions you have and to chat with you.
Yep, and to explain that little hiccup there, so I am in London right now, and it's starting to, like, the sun's setting, which is why suddenly the sun is starting to hit straight on my face. But yeah, all of your insights were really, really cool, and hopefully we'll be able to touch base on that on our upcoming Zoom lecture. But we were going to address some questions right now, and starting with were characters decided in this book? And then there's a follow-up of how was the art style decided? So I assume that you're thinking of the design of the characters, but obviously we're going to talk about the characters in general as well. As far as I was concerned, just for the design, I tried to draw from people that I knew. There were two versions of the dad. The first version that I drew was actually based on one of my best friends, but he looked a little bit too, maybe, I don't know, too thin, too slender, maybe too young. And so we ended up going to a second version that is actually based on my brother. And the reason of that being that the kid from the very start was drawn from my imagination based on the kid that my brother was going to be having. So I thought of the features of my sister-in-law and my brother. I tried to blend them, and I tried to remember what my brother looked like when he was younger. And that's what gave me kind of an inquisitive mind to try and see what was the best kind of appealing looking face to have. And something that I wanted, something that would encapsulate a lot of the, like, whenever my brother as a younger kid would see himself, he would see himself and he would only see the bad things. So he would only see that he was more tanned than the rest of us, like the other siblings. He would notice that his hair stuck out in funny ways in his head, and that his ears were too pointed. So like he was obsessed with just like keeping them close to his skull. So as far as I was concerned, it was just like, cool, he's going to have hair that sticks out, he's going to be tanned, and he's going to have his ears sticking out as well. So that was kind of like the main thing that I was drawing from physically. And then the art style was mostly experimenting with all of the little elements that made the borders what they were. And it ended up being very angular and kind of sharp and lopsided for the Mexican side, and very square, very Wes Andersonian for the US side, in that that's how the streets are drawn. And there's a lot of sidewalks in Mexico that are kind of twisted and wonky and don't make much sense. And the houses are also kind of like, you know, we add stuff to it, and then there's this funny like element that sticks out, and then there's this castle that isn't finished. And so that was my way to kind of bring all of these feelings of the two towns into, you know, graphic language. But then I'm gonna let the man who handled the language take it over from here.
Yeah, I have to say that this is it's kind of delightful to be presenting to high school students because it affords you the opportunity to say Wes Andersonian, which is something you wouldn't.
And it's a thing.
Yeah, which is something you would not say to a bunch of kindergartners. So if you guys don't know who Wes Anderson is, look him up as director. You've probably seen a couple of his movies. Quirky.
And everything's flat.
Cool. Everything's flat. It's very square. So these insights that Erika's giving you about the design, especially of the father and the son, worked really, really nicely with what my intentions were, which was to take my experiences with my son, because when I grew up, I would go across the border all the time with my dad, but it was a different time. It was the 70s and 80s, and it was much easier. There wasn't the traffic jams that there are now. It didn't take hours to get back and forth. There weren't a lot of questions being asked. Everybody understood that the town, because I grew up in McAllen, which is, I guess, one of the bigger towns here. But back then it was relatively small. And the other town, the bordering town, was Reynosa. And people just would go back and forth. And there was just, I don't know, there was no one ever blinked an eye. It was like the most normal thing in the world. And that kind of changed in the late 90s and early 2000s. And people began to see the notion of crossing the border as being problematic and dangerous, or somehow like not really like American. I don't know. A lot of weird things started happening, but I continued that tradition with my own children. And so when I was writing this book, I was imagining the way it was when my son was really little and we would cross back and forth. I was projecting that on the present. My son is off at college, and so didn't get to experience meeting these asylum seekers like my wife and I did after our kids had already grown and moved away. But I was imagining what it would have been like for him to be little. And so, you know, because there's a difference between my son and me. I am like the lightest skinned person in my family. I'm the güero. My dad was, you know, much darker skinned than I was, and all my cousins were, and so forth. The only person lighter skinned than me who eventually came along was my younger brother Mateo, and then our brother Fernando came along, and he was darker than us. And this is what happens a lot of times in Mexican and Mexican American families. You have 3 kids, and all 3 of them are like different skin tones. It's a part of our blended genetic heritage, right? And my son is much darker skinned than I am. And so the contrast that Erika created by choosing her brother's template for the boy worked really, really well, because then there's like contrast in skin tones between the dad and the son. And the dad looking like just slightly more European than the boy was something that I was really, really happy with. It was like, okay, well, I feel that inadvertently Erika has created characters that are echoes of my son and myself, even though like that was never like clear in any of the art direction or whatever. So it was just great. It was like serendipitous. It was fantastic.
I didn't know that. That makes me really happy.
Yeah. And you know, my son, I still remember my son when he was very little, not wanting to use Spanish, and like getting really adamant. And my wife would speak to him in Spanish, and he would answer her in English, and she'd be like, ¿Por qué no me contestas en español? And he would like turn his arm and point to the inside of his arm, which was like the lightest part of his body. And he would say, I'm white, mommy. I need to speak English. And my wife would turn his arm down, and she said, you are not white. You are not white, she would tell him. You know, it was so funny. Colorism is a big issue, and the Latinx community broadly, and the Mexican American community specifically. I'm suspecting that that some of the students in Ms. Padilla-Garcia's class are Mexican or Mexican American, and so you will identify with this. So these are like just subtle things that you drop into a book like this. You don't want to bombard. It's already got a really heavy message for young people, and so I didn't want to like complicate it more with issues of colorism. But in other books that I've written, like They Call Me Güero, colorism is something that's grappled with a lot. So the next question, how long did it take to write? And then the follow-up, how long did it take to illustrate? Writing a picture book is a lot different than writing like a middle grade novel or a YA novel, which, you know, novels can take me anywhere from 3 months to 6 months to write. More complex books, like something like Feathered Serpent, Dark Heart of Sky, which has got a lot of translations from Nahuatl and Yucateco and stuff like that, can take me years and years and years to finish. Well, this picture book took me a month to write, and but a month to write the rough draft, and then I gave it to my agent, and she and I went back and forth making adjustments to it, and then it went out on submission, which means my agent sends it off to a bunch of editors that she thinks will be interested in it, and it actually went to auction, which means that there were multiple publishing houses who wanted it. 5 different publishing houses made offers, and we eventually went with Coquilas, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House, because they just had the right vision, and they agreed to publish it simultaneously in English and Spanish, which is something I definitely wanted. to have mis dos pueblos fronterizos and my two border towns at the released at the same time. So then with my editor Joanna Cardenas, we went back and forth, adjusting it, and then once Erika was brought on board, we handed it off to her, and you can talk a little bit about that process.
Yeah, and with me, I mean, I'll get into more details and use visuals and stuff when we do chat in person sometime soon. But the really difficult thing was that I didn't want to just focus on the bit of the border that had inspired the story. Like, I came from the other end of the border, the Canada.
she's actually French Canadian, guys. She's lying about her Mexican American heritage. Yes.
No, the Tijuana, San Diego side of the border. And so what I was actually focused on was, okay, I want this to obviously speak to the people in the place where it actually, like where the story was born, but to also kind of be this cool thing, this cool inner joke that all kids in the border can share, because it's already such a unique place to grow up in, and it is already loaded with such negative connotations. Like, as soon as you show the border in a film, you turn the sepia filter on, and you've got the los carrizales, the balls of dry stuff that are rolling around in the background, and you've got
tumbleweeds.
Tumbleweeds. Thank you very much for that. So I wanted something that would actually encompass the whole area, and as you can imagine, it's really freaking complicated. So what I ended up doing was I invested a lot of time in researching the place where I was working, because I wanted to be able to say, okay, just like you can write a poem with specific words, I want to know what my vocabulary is, my visual vocabulary, to be able to write this book, as it were. So the more I drew, the more connections that I started to make, the more I started to come up with stuff like what I was talking about before, the wonkiness, the angles, that feeling of, it's a different place, but it's the same one. And then once I had all of that down, and this was all done over a couple of months, then it was actually easier to just go through the sketches and say, I'm going to show this, this, and that, and I'm not going to show all of this, because I also didn't want to be overwhelmed with the amount of details, as it were. It already was freaking, like, there's a spread in the book, I'm sure you will know which one, that took 3 weeks to paint the whole thing. And then the whole book actually took 3 months to paint, like in the final art, plus the hiccups here and there, and then the edits that we had to send back. And then once we wrapped it up, that was it for like a year until we had the baby.
Yes, our little baby came in a box.
Yes, after a long way of...
with lots of clones of the baby. the multiple copies
stuck in a container for who knows how long.
From China, yeah, because these books are printed in China, which is really, really common with full color books like this.
And COVID happened.
Yep, and so there were all these, and there was also what's called the supply chain issues, because there was a paper shortage. So like everything that could happen happened in the book. I guess the publication date got pushed almost 2 months eventually, right? Wasn't it? Or at least 1 month. Yeah.
It got changed 3 times, I think.
Yeah. Which is, you're like, no, what? The book is already coming out during the pandemic, and then the publication date keeps getting pushed. It was complicated.
I know.
Yeah. So I think we've talked a little bit about our process and so forth, and we're really looking forward to meeting with you guys and delving more deeply into all of the inspiration behind the particular elements of the book and some philosophical ideas and so forth. But in the meantime, hopefully this tides you over, and we're super excited to chat again really, really soon.
Yes, thank you so much. Looking forward to meeting you guys. And now you've got a sense of what to expect. So now hopefully it will not be too strange. Why are these two actually doing some kind of rom-com sitcom dynamic here?
Yeah, exactly. We're like stand-up comedians. I don't know which of us is which of us is like the straight person and the other one the joker. You know how there's always I think we're both doomed. We're both, yeah, we both do both roles. But anyway, our comedy routine will be on screens near you very soon. So take care until then. Bye.
Until then, thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.